The morning air was heavy with the scent of rain as dark clouds loomed over the bustling streets of Chicago. It had been drizzling since early dawn, and by the time Marcus Thompson stepped out of his small apartment building, the city was already drenched in water. The sidewalks glistened under the pale light of street lamps, reflecting the hurried movements of people rushing to their destinations. Marcus tightened his grip on his umbrella and adjusted the strap of his worn leather bag, slung across his shoulder. Inside the bag was a folder containing his resume, painstakingly updated and polished over weeks. Today was the day he'd been preparing for, a job interview at one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the city. Marcus wasn't someone who took chances lightly. At 28 years old, he had spent the better part of his adult life working odd jobs to make ends meet while dreaming of something bigger. He believed this interview could be the turning point he desperately needed. For days, he had rehearsed answers to potential questions, researched the company, and even practiced tying his tie in front of the mirror. This was his chance to step into a world where hard work paid off, where doors opened not because of luck, but because of merit. As he descended into the subway station, the noise of the city faded slightly, replaced by the rhythmic clatter of trains and distant announcements echoing through the tunnels. The train car was packed with commuters, some buried in their phones, others staring blankly ahead, lost in thought. Marcus stood near the door, clutching the metal pole for balance as the train rattled along its tracks. His mind kept wandering back to the interview. What if they asked him about his lack of formal experience? What if he stumbled over his words or forgot to mention something important? He shook his head, trying to push those thoughts aside. Doubt wouldn't get him anywhere. Confidence would. When the train finally arrived at his stop, Marcus emerged, onto the wet pavement above ground. The rain had picked up now, falling steadily in sheets that soaked everything it touched. Pedestrians huddled beneath their umbrellas, hurrying across intersections before traffic lights changed. Cars splashed through puddles, sending sprays of water onto the curbs. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter around himself and quickened his pace. He glanced at his watch. There was still enough time to reach the office without being late, provided nothing unexpected happened. But just as he was about to cross the street, something did happen. Out of the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed an elderly woman struggling to navigate the slippery sidewalk. She leaned heavily on a wooden cane, her steps slow and deliberate as she tried to keep her balance. A gust of wind caught her umbrella, flipping it inside out, and she let out a soft gasp as the rain began pelting her face. Her grocery bags, filled to the brim with fresh produce and household items, swayed precariously in her hands. And then, as though fate itself conspired against her, one of the bags tore open, spilling oranges, apples, and canned goods onto the wet pavement. Without thinking twice, Marcus darted toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he called out, raising his voice to be heard over the sound of the rain. The woman looked up, startled, her glasses fogged from the moisture. She nodded weakly, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Marcus crouched down beside her, shielding both of them with his umbrella as best he could. Together they began gathering the scattered groceries, stuffing them back into the torn bag. Oranges rolled away into the gutters, and Marcus chased after them, retrieving what he could. Just as he handed her the last item, a speeding car drove past, sending a wave of water crashing onto the sidewalk. The woman flinched, and Marcus instinctively stepped in front of her to block the splash. "I'm so sorry," the driver shouted half-heartedly from the window before disappearing down the road. Marcus sighed and turned back to the woman, who was now shivering slightly despite her thick coat. Her hair was damp, clinging to her forehead, and her cheeks were flushed red from the cold. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked gently, concern etched on his face. No, I'm fine," she replied, her voice trembling but warm. "Thank you for helping me. You didn't have to do that." "It's no problem," Marcus said with a reassuring smile. "But we should get you out of this rain. Do you live nearby?" The woman hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, just a few blocks away, but I don't want to trouble you further." "You're not troubling me," Marcus insisted. He couldn't leave her alone in such weather, not when she was clearly having trouble walking. Helping her carry her groceries seemed like the least he could do. As they walked together, Marcus noticed how frail the woman appeared. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her cane, and every step seemed to require immense effort. Yet, there was a quiet dignity about her, a strength that transcended her physical limitations. They made small talk along the way, mostly about the unpredictable weather and how miserable Mondays could be. Marcus learned that her name was Margaret, and that she lived alone in a high-rise apartment building not far from where they met. Despite her struggles, Margaret radiated kindness, thanking Marcus repeatedly for his help. By the time they reached her building, Marcus knew he was cutting it dangerously close to his interview time. He glanced at his watch again and felt a pang of anxiety. Still, seeing Margaret safely inside felt more urgent than anything else at that moment. Once they were in the lobby, Margaret pressed the elevator button and turned to him with a grateful smile. "This is my stop," she said softly. "I can't thank you enough for your kindness today, young man." "It was nothing," Marcus replied modestly. "I'm just glad I could help." Before stepping into the elevator, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small business card. Handing it to him, she added, "If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me. Consider this my way of saying thank you." Marcus accepted the card, glancing at it briefly before slipping it into his pocket. "Thank you," he said sincerely. With that, the elevator doors closed, and Margaret disappeared from view. Standing in the opulent lobby, Marcus exhaled deeply, suddenly aware of how late he was running. He sprinted back outside, his heart pounding as he navigated the crowded streets toward the office building where his interview was supposed to take place. As he ran, he couldn't shake the feeling that helping Margaret had been the right thing to do, even if it meant jeopardizing his own plans. Little did he know that brief encounter would set off a chain of events far greater than he could have imagined. As Marcus stepped out of the elevator and into the grand lobby of Margaret's apartment building, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of unease. The lobby was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, and plush leather chairs lined the walls, inviting visitors to sit and relax. A sleek concierge desk stood at the center, manned by a sharply dressed attendant who greeted residents with polite smiles and crisp nods. It was clear that this wasn't just any ordinary apartment building. It was a place reserved for people of considerable means. Margaret seemed unfazed by the opulence around her, as though she belonged there, which Marcus realized she probably did. She walked with slow but steady steps toward the concierge, exchanging a few words with the attendant, before turning back to Marcus. "Thank you again," she said warmly, gesturing for him to follow her further into the lobby. "You've been so kind. Let me at least offer you a cup of coffee before you head off." Marcus hesitated. He glanced at his watch once more, his heart sinking as he calculated how much time he had left to make it to his interview. At this rate, he would be lucky to arrive within the hour, let alone on time. But something about Margaret's demeanor stopped him from refusing outright. There was an earnestness in her voice, a genuine gratitude that made it impossible for him to say no. Besides, after seeing her struggle in the rain, leaving her now felt wrong. "All right," Marcus said finally, forcing a smile. "A quick cup wouldn't hurt." Margaret led him to a cozy seating area tucked away in a corner of the lobby. She lowered herself carefully into one of the chairs, motioning for Marcus to do the same. As they sat, she pulled out her phone and sent a message to someone, a housekeeper or assistant perhaps, requesting coffee to be brought down. Within moments, a young woman appeared carrying a silver tray laden with 2 steaming mugs, sugar packets, creamers, and even a small plate of cookies. Margaret thanked her graciously before turning her attention back to Marcus. "This is lovely," Marcus remarked, lifting the mug to his lips. The coffee was rich and aromatic, far better than anything he usually drank from the corner cafe near his apartment. He took another sip, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest. For a brief moment, the stress of the day melted away, replaced by the comforting ambiance of the lobby and Margaret's calming presence. "You have a good heart," Margaret said suddenly, breaking the silence between them. Her tone was soft but firm, as if she were stating a fact rather than offering praise. Not many people would stop what they're doing to help a stranger like that. Not these days, anyway. Marcus chuckled nervously, setting the mug down, on the table. I didn't think twice about it, he admitted. You looked like you needed a hand. And I did, Margaret replied, her eyes twinkling behind her foggy glasses. But still not everyone would have noticed or cared enough to act. That speaks volumes about your character, Mr. Oh, sorry, Marcus said quickly, realizing he hadn't introduced himself properly. It's Marcus Thompson. Well, Marcus, Margaret continued, leaning back in her chair, I appreciate what you did today more than I can express. Kindness like yours doesn't go unnoticed, at least not by me. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of how to respond. He wasn't used to receiving such heartfelt compliments, especially from someone he had only just met. Before he could muster a reply, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small business card. She held it out to him, her expression unreadable. In case you ever need anything, she said simply, don't hesitate to call me, I mean it. Marcus accepted the card, glancing at it briefly before slipping it into his pocket. The card was plain, bearing only her name, Margaret Whitmore, and a phone number written in neat cursive. There was no company logo, no title, nothing to indicate who she really was beyond the elegant script. To Marcus, it seemed like a gesture of goodwill, nothing more. Little did he know those simple words, don't hesitate to call me, would carry far more weight than he could have imagined. The conversation drifted naturally from there, touching on topics ranging from the unpredictable weather to Marcus's ambitions and aspirations. Margaret listened intently, nodding occasionally as he spoke about his hopes of landing a stable job in marketing. Though she didn't share much about herself, her questions were thoughtful and probing, revealing a keen interest in his story. By the time their coffee cups were empty, Marcus found himself relaxing in her company, forgetting momentarily about the looming interview he was bound to miss. Eventually, Margaret glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. I suppose I've kept you long enough, she said apologetically. You must have somewhere important to be. Marcus nodded, his stomach tightening as reality came crashing back. Yeah, I do, he admitted reluctantly. An interview. I'm already running late. Margaret raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. And yet you stayed to help me, she observed. That says a lot about you, Marcus. Don't forget that. With that cryptic remark, she rose slowly to her feet, gripping her cane for support. Marcus stood as well, feeling a mix of guilt and gratitude wash over him. On one hand, he knew he should have left earlier, should have prioritized his own future over helping a stranger. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that staying with Margaret had been the right thing to do, even if it cost him dearly. I'll walk you out, Margaret offered, leading the way toward the revolving doors. As they stepped outside, the rain had eased slightly, though puddles still dotted the sidewalks and the air remained thick with moisture. Marcus turned to face her, extending his hand in farewell. Thank you. For everything, he said sincerely, and thank you for the coffee. I really appreciate it. Margaret smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. No, thank you, Marcus. You've reminded me today that there's still goodness in the world. Don't lose sight of that. With those parting words, she disappeared back inside the building, leaving Marcus standing alone on the curb. He watched her go, the weight of her gratitude settling heavily on his shoulders. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what might have been if he had chosen differently. If he had ignored Margaret and rushed straight to his interview instead. Would he regret his decision? Or would the memory of her smile and kind words stay with him forever? Shaking his head to clear his thoughts, Marcus glanced at his watch one last time. There was no point dwelling on what-ifs now. He had a choice to make, either give up entirely or try to salvage what little hope he had left. Taking a deep breath, he tightened his grip on his umbrella and set off at a brisk pace, determined to reach the office building where his interview was supposed to take place. But as he navigated the crowded streets, weaving past pedestrians, and dodging cars splashing through puddles, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, Had fate intervened in some way? Was there a reason he crossed paths with Margaret today, of all days? The questions lingered in his mind, unanswered, as he pushed forward, hoping against hope that his gamble would pay off in ways he couldn't yet foresee. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Marcus reached the towering glass building where his interview was supposed to take place. His shoes squelched with each step, soaked from the puddles he hadn't been able to avoid in his hurried dash across the city. The weight of his damp clothes clung uncomfortably to him, but it wasn't the discomfort that made his stomach churn. It was the gnawing sense of dread bubbling inside. He glanced at his watch again, though he already knew the truth. He was 20 minutes late. As he approached the sleek revolving doors, Marcus hesitated for a moment, catching his reflection in the polished glass. His usually neat hair was flattened by the rain, and dark circles under his eyes betrayed the restless night he'd spent rehearsing answers to potential questions. He looked tired, disheveled, and completely unprepared for what awaited him inside. Still, he couldn't turn back now. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the doors and stepped into the pristine lobby. The reception area buzzed with quiet efficiency. A young woman sat behind a sleek desk, typing furiously on her keyboard while glancing occasionally at the phone beside her. The walls were adorned with modern art pieces, their abstract shapes adding a touch of sophistication to the otherwise sterile environment. Everything about the space screamed professionalism, making Marcus feel even more out of place as water dripped from his umbrella onto the pristine marble floor. "Hi," Marcus said, clearing his throat as he approached the receptionist. "I'm here for an interview with—" "Oh, Mr. Thompson," the receptionist interrupted, looking up from her computer screen with a polite but slightly strained smile. "You're quite late. They've already moved on to other candidates." Marcus froze, his heart sinking like a stone. "What? No, I was delayed helping someone. It wasn't my fault." "I understand," she said quickly, cutting him off before he could explain further. Her tone was sympathetic but firm. "Unfortunately, punctuality is very important for this role. The team has already begun interviewing others. There's nothing I can do." For a moment, Marcus stood there, stunned. His mind raced as he tried to process her words. All those hours spent perfecting his resume, all the sleepless nights preparing. For this opportunity, it had all been for nothing. Because he had chosen to help Margaret, he had missed his chance. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless and defeated. "Thank you," he managed to mutter finally, forcing a weak smile despite the turmoil brewing inside him. Turning away from the desk, he trudged toward the exit, every step feeling heavier than the last. As he stepped back into the cool air outside, the drizzle seemed to mock him, droplets clinging to his skin like tiny reminders of his failure. He opened his umbrella automatically, though it did little to shield him from the storm raging within. By the time Marcus arrived home, the sun was beginning to peek through the clouds, casting a pale golden light over the city. But the warmth of the afternoon did nothing to lift his spirits. He tossed his umbrella onto the kitchen counter and collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. His thoughts swirled chaotically. What if he had left Margaret earlier? What if he had ignored her struggle and rushed straight to the interview instead? Would he have succeeded then? Or would he still be sitting here, wondering what might have been? Hours passed in a haze of self-doubt and frustration. Eventually, Marcus decided to distract himself by scrolling through social media on his phone. At first, it was just mindless browsing. Pictures of friends enjoying vacations, memes meant to elicit laughter, advertisements for products he didn't need. But then, something caught his eye. A headline on a news website read, "Margaret Whitmore, the visionary leader behind Whitmore Enterprises." Curious, Marcus clicked on the article. What he saw next made his blood run cold. The screen displayed a photograph of the same elderly woman he had helped earlier that day, the frail figure with the wooden cane and foggy glasses. Only now she was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, her silver hair styled elegantly around her face. Beneath the photo was a caption identifying her as none other than Margaret Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, one of the largest Fortune 500 companies in the country. Marcus stared at the screen, his jaw dropping in disbelief. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through the article, reading about Margaret's rise to success, her innovative leadership style, and her commitment to giving back to the community. According to the piece, she was known not only for her business acumen but also for her humility and dedication to helping others, a trait that had earned her widespread admiration both within and outside the corporate world. His mind reeled as he processed the information. The woman whose groceries he had picked up in the rain, the woman who had offered him coffee and thanked him profusely for his kindness, was one of the most powerful executives in the nation. How had he not realized it sooner? She had mentioned nothing during their brief encounter, no hint of her status or influence. Instead, she had treated him with genuine warmth and gratitude, as if he were any other person passing by. Suddenly, the small business card Margaret had given him earlier came flooding back to his memory. Reaching into his pocket, Marcus pulled it out and examined it closely. The elegant handwriting spelling out her name seemed almost prophetic now. Could it be possible that she had recognized something in him worth remembering? Or had she simply been polite, extending a courtesy she would offer to anyone? Doubts crept into his mind, but so did a flicker of hope. If anyone understood the value of kindness, it was Margaret Whitmore. Perhaps, just perhaps, reaching out to her wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. After all, she had told him explicitly not to hesitate if he needed anything. Wasn't this exactly the kind of situation she might have been referring to? With trembling hands, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed the number on the card. Each ring felt like an eternity, stretching. His nerves taut as he waited for someone, anyone, to answer. Finally, a voice spoke on the other end, calm and measured. "Hello?" It was Margaret. Recognition sparked immediately in her tone when she heard Marcus's voice. "Oh, Marcus. I was wondering if you'd call," she said warmly. "How are you doing?" I'm fine, thank you." Marcus stammered, unsure of how to begin. "Listen, Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted to apologize for being late today. I ended up missing an important interview because I stayed to help you." There was a pause on the line, followed by a soft chuckle. "Marcus, please don't apologize. You did the right thing by helping me. And besides, I owe you a debt of gratitude for your kindness. But I really needed that job," Marcus admitted, his voice tinged with desperation. "It was my shot at something bigger. Now I've messed it all up." Another pause, longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her tone was thoughtful. Sometimes life has a way of steering us toward opportunities we never expected. "Tell me, Marcus, do you believe in fate?" He frowned, caught off guard by the question. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness lead to the greatest rewards," Margaret replied, cryptically. "Come see me tomorrow morning at my office. We'll talk more then." Before Marcus could respond, she ended the call, leaving him holding the phone in stunned silence. Had she really just invited him to visit her at Whitmore Enterprises? The thought sent a thrill of excitement coursing through him, mingled with a healthy dose of skepticism. Was this some sort of trick? Or was Margaret truly offering him a lifeline? Whatever the case, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He couldn't pass up the opportunity. Tomorrow morning he would go to her office, not knowing what awaited him, but determined to find out. For the first time since stepping into that rain-soaked street earlier that day, Marcus allowed himself to feel a glimmer of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, his decision to help Margaret hadn't been a mistake after all. The next morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. He had spent most of the night tossing and turning, replaying Margaret's words in his mind. "Come see me tomorrow morning at my office," she had said. Those simple words carried so much weight, yet they left him with more questions than answers. What did she want to talk about? Was this some sort of test? Or was it truly an opportunity disguised as coincidence? As he got ready, Marcus paid extra attention to his appearance, choosing a crisp white shirt and a pair of neatly pressed slacks, the best outfit he owned. He even borrowed a tie from his neighbor, tying it carefully in front of the mirror until it looked just right. For once, he didn't feel like he was dressing for a job interview. Instead, he felt like he was stepping into uncharted territory where every detail mattered. By the time he arrived at Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, the sun was shining brightly, casting long shadows across the gleaming skyscraper that housed the company. The building itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, its glass facade reflecting the blue sky above. As Marcus approached the entrance, he couldn't help but feel dwarfed by the sheer scale of the structure and by the realization that Margaret Whitmore, one of the most influential people in the business world, worked here. Inside, the lobby was bustling with activity. Employees hurried past, clutching folders and laptops, while visitors waited patiently at the reception desk. Marcus took a deep breath and approached the same young woman who had greeted him during his ill-fated interview the day before. This time, however, he wasn't there for a generic position listed online. He was there to meet someone far more important. "Hi, I'm Marcus Thompson," he said, trying to sound confident despite the butterflies fluttering in his stomach. "I have a meeting with Margaret Whitmore." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Ms. Whitmore?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. It was obvious that few people walked into the building claiming to have a personal appointment with the CEO. "Do you have confirmation of this meeting?" Marcus hesitated, suddenly doubting himself. Had he misunderstood Margaret's invitation? Was this whole thing a mistake? Before he could spiral into panic, he pulled out the business card she had given him and handed it over. "She told me to come this morning," he explained. "This is her card." The receptionist examined the card closely, then nodded slowly. "All right, Mr. Thompson. Let me check with her assistant." She picked up the phone and spoke quietly for a moment before hanging up and turning back to Marcus. "You're cleared to go up. Take the elevator to the 25th floor. Her assistant will meet you there." Relief washed over Marcus as he stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 25th floor. The ride seemed to take forever, each ding of the passing floors amplifying his anxiety. By the time the doors slid open, he felt like he might burst from nervous energy. Stepping out, he found himself in a spacious hallway lined with artwork and plush seating areas. At the end of the hall stood a polished wooden door with a plaque reading Margaret Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. Beside it sat a desk occupied by a sharply dressed man typing on a laptop. "Mr. Thompson?" the assistant asked, standing up and extending a hand. "Ms. Whitmore is expecting you. Please follow me." Marcus followed the assistant through the door, entering a corner office that took his breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city skyline, while tasteful furniture and decor created an atmosphere of understated elegance. And there, seated behind a large mahogany desk, was Margaret Whitmore herself. She looked every bit the powerful executive she was, yet her smile remained as warm and inviting as it had been the day before. "Marcus!" she exclaimed, rising from her chair to greet him. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." He obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge of a leather chair as she settled back into hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. Finally, Margaret leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here," she began, her gaze steady and unwavering. "To be honest, yes," Marcus admitted, shifting uncomfortably. "I thought maybe, well, I wasn't sure what to expect." Margaret chuckled softly. "Let me start by saying that your act of kindness yesterday meant a great deal to me. In fact, it reminded me of something I've always believed, that character matters more than credentials. I've seen countless resumes filled with impressive qualifications, but rarely do I encounter someone who puts others first without hesitation." Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. "I was just doing what anyone would have done," he mumbled, though he knew deep down that wasn't entirely true. "No, Marcus," Margaret countered gently. "Not everyone would have stopped to help me, not when they were running late for something as important as a job interview. That speaks volumes about who you are." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry. "But I missed the interview because of it," he said finally. "Doesn't that count against me?" Margaret shook her head. "Life isn't about following a straight path, Marcus. Sometimes detours lead us exactly where we're meant to go. And sometimes the qualities we demonstrate along the way matter more than any resume or title ever could." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Here's the truth. Whitmore Enterprises is looking for individuals who embody our values, people who care about making a difference, not just climbing the corporate ladder. When I saw how you treated me, a stranger in need, I realized you might be exactly the kind of person we're searching for." Marcus stared at her, stunned. Was she offering him a job? If so, what kind of role would it be? His confusion must have shown on his face because Margaret smiled knowingly. "I'd like to offer you an internship in our community outreach division," she explained. "It's not the marketing position you originally sought, but it's a chance to make a real impact. You'll work directly under my supervision, helping develop programs that support underserved communities and promote social responsibility. Does that interest you?" For a moment, Marcus didn't know what to say. On one hand, this wasn't the glamorous career trajectory he had envisioned. On the other hand, the idea of working alongside Margaret Whitmore, of contributing to meaningful initiatives that aligned with his own values, was incredibly appealing. More than anything, it felt like fate giving him a second chance. "Yes," he said finally, his voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. "I'd love to take the opportunity." Margaret beamed, her eyes lighting up with approval. "Excellent. I think you'll find it rewarding, and challenging, of course, but I have faith in you, Marcus. You've already proven that you have the heart of a leader." Over the next hour, they discussed the specifics of the internship, the responsibilities, the timeline, and the goals Margaret hoped to achieve through the program. As they talked, Marcus grew increasingly excited. This wasn't just a fallback plan. It was a chance to grow, to learn, and to prove himself in ways he hadn't considered before. When the meeting ended, Margaret walked him to the door, shaking his hand firmly. "Welcome to Whitmore Enterprises, Marcus," she said with a smile. "I look forward to seeing what you accomplish." As Marcus stepped back into the elevator, he couldn't help but grin. Yesterday he had been a man drowning in disappointment, convinced that his dreams were slipping through his fingers. Today he was standing on the threshold of something new and unexpected, a journey shaped not by luck, but by the choices he had made and the person he chose to be. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Kindness had opened this door, and he intended to walk through it with purpose. The internship at Whitmore Enterprises started off as a whirlwind of activity, challenges, and learning opportunities. From the very first day, Marcus threw himself into his work with an energy that surprised even himself. The Community Outreach Division was a dynamic department filled with passionate individuals who shared Margaret's vision of creating positive change in underserved communities. For Marcus, it was both exhilarating and overwhelming, a crash course in teamwork, strategy, and leadership. His initial tasks were relatively simple: organizing data, attending meetings, and assisting senior members of the team with research projects. But Marcus quickly realized that no task was too small to make an impact. Whether it was drafting emails to potential partners or brainstorming ideas for fundraising campaigns, he approached every responsibility with enthusiasm and attention to detail. He wanted to prove not only to Margaret but also to himself that he deserved this opportunity. Margaret took a keen interest in Marcus's progress from the beginning. She often stopped by his desk to ask how things were going or invited him to join her for coffee in her office. These informal check-ins weren't just about evaluating his performance, they were opportunities for mentorship. Margaret had a way of asking questions that made Marcus think deeply about his goals, values, and motivations. "Why do you want to help others?" she asked him once during one of their conversations. "What drives you?" At first, Marcus struggled to articulate an answer. Growing up in a modest household where money was always tight, he had seen firsthand how difficult life could be without support systems. But beyond that, He couldn't pinpoint exactly why helping others felt so important to him. Over time, however, those conversations helped him clarify his thoughts. By reflecting on his experiences and aspirations, Marcus began to understand that his desire to give back stemmed from a belief in fairness, a conviction that everyone deserved a fair shot at success regardless of their circumstances. As weeks turned into months, Marcus's role within the division expanded. His natural charisma and creativity caught Margaret's attention early on, leading her to assign him more significant responsibilities. One of his first major projects involved developing a program aimed at providing job training and placement services for young adults transitioning out of foster care. It was a daunting task, requiring coordination with multiple organizations, government agencies, and local businesses, but Marcus dove into the project with determination, determined to create something meaningful. He spent countless hours researching best practices, conducting interviews with experts, and meeting with stakeholders to gather input. Late nights became the norm as he pored over spreadsheets, drafted proposals, and fine-tuned presentations. Despite the long hours, Marcus never felt burned out. Quite the opposite. Every step forward fueled his passion, reminding him why he had taken this path in the first place. When the program launched 6 months later, it exceeded all expectations. Dozens of young adults enrolled in the training workshops, gaining valuable skills and securing stable employment. Local news outlets covered the initiative, praising its innovative approach and tangible results. And when Margaret announced the program's success during a company-wide meeting, she made sure to highlight Marcus's contributions. Marcus didn't just execute this project, she said, addressing the room full of employees. He poured his heart and soul into it. His dedication, creativity, and compassion are what made it a success. The applause that followed was thunderous, leaving Marcus blushing and humbled. For the first time in his life, he felt truly valued, not just for his work, but for who he was as a person. That moment marked a turning point in his journey, solidifying his confidence and inspiring him to aim even higher. With each passing month, Marcus continued to rise through the ranks. His hard work earned him promotions, increasing responsibilities, and recognition both inside and outside the company. He became a trusted member of the team, someone colleagues turned to for advice and guidance. Margaret remained a constant source of encouragement, pushing him to take on bigger challenges while reminding him to stay grounded. "You're doing incredible work, Marcus," she told him during one of their regular meetings. "But remember, true leadership isn't about titles or accolades. It's about lifting others up, empowering them to achieve their potential. Never lose sight of that." Her words resonated deeply with Marcus, shaping the way he interacted with his peers and mentees. As he took on more leadership roles, he made it a priority to nurture talent within the division, mentoring interns and junior staff members much like Margaret had done for him. He believed strongly in paying it forward, knowing firsthand how transformative kindness and support could be. Outside of work, Marcus found ways to continue giving back to his community. He volunteered at local shelters, participated in charity events, and spoke at schools about the importance of perseverance and empathy. His story, the story of a man who missed a job interview to help a stranger and ended up changing his own life, became a favorite topic among friends, family, and acquaintances. People admired not just his achievements but the values that guided him. Despite his growing responsibilities, Marcus remained humble. He knew that none of his success would have been possible without the foundation laid by Margaret's belief in him. Whenever doubts crept in, he reminded himself of the rainy morning when everything changed, the moment he chose kindness over self-interest. That decision had set off a chain reaction, leading him to opportunities he never could have imagined. The end of his second year at Whitmore Enterprises, Marcus had become one of the youngest executives in the company's history. Though still part of the community outreach division, he now oversaw several high-profile initiatives, managing budgets, teams, and partnerships. His name appeared regularly in industry publications, and invitations to speak at conferences poured in. Yet despite his newfound fame, Marcus stayed true to his roots. He wore his success lightly, preferring quiet reflection to public celebration. One evening, after a particularly grueling week, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the city lights below. The view reminded him of Margaret's office, the same breathtaking panorama of skyscrapers and streets teeming with life. He thought about how far he'd come since that fateful rainy day, and how much he owed to the woman who had given him a chance when no one else would. A soft knock on his door interrupted his reverie. Opening it, he found a delivery person holding a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a handwritten note from Margaret, accompanied by a framed photograph of the two of them standing together at the launch event for the foster care program. The note read, "Dear Marcus, your journey is proof that kindness and integrity can open doors we never knew existed. Keep shining your light. It's needed now more than ever. With gratitude, Margaret." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he held the frame close. In that moment, he realized that his story wasn't just about personal success, it was about connection, compassion, and the ripple effects of choosing to do the right thing. And as he placed the photograph on his desk, he vowed to carry those lessons with him, wherever life took him next. Years had passed since that rainy morning when Marcus first met Margaret Whitmore, and his life was almost unrecognizable from the days when he struggled to make ends meet. Now a senior executive at Whitmore Enterprises, Marcus had become a household name in the business world, not because of flashy titles or extravagant achievements, but because of the values he embodied: kindness, humility, and an unwavering commitment to helping others. His journey from a struggling young man to one of the youngest leaders in a Fortune 500 company served as an inspiration not only to those around him, but also to countless strangers who heard his story. Margaret's mentorship continued to shape Marcus's career long after their initial meetings. She remained a guiding force in his professional life, always encouraging him to push boundaries while staying grounded in his principles. Under her watchful eye, Marcus developed innovative programs that addressed some of society's most pressing challenges, from affordable housing initiatives to educational scholarships for underprivileged youth. Each project bore the mark of his unique approach, combining strategic thinking with heartfelt compassion. It wasn't uncommon for colleagues to remark that Marcus didn't just lead, he inspired. But Marcus knew that true success wasn't measured by awards or promotions. It was reflected in the lives he touched and the opportunities he created for others. This belief became the cornerstone of his leadership style. Whether mentoring interns fresh out of college or collaborating with community organizations, Marcus made it a point to uplift everyone he encountered. He often reminded his team that we succeed when we lift others up, echoing Margaret's own words from years ago. These lessons weren't confined to the boardroom. They spilled over into every aspect of his life. One of the proudest moments of Marcus's career came when he spearheaded a nationwide campaign to bridge the digital divide in low-income communities. The initiative provided free internet access, laptops, and tech training to thousands of families, empowering them to participate fully in the modern economy. The program received widespread acclaim, earning recognition from policymakers, educators, and industry leaders alike. At the heart of its success was Marcus's ability to listen, to hear the stories of people living without basic resources and translate their needs into actionable solutions. When the campaign launched, Margaret stood beside him on stage at the press conference, beaming with pride. "This is what happens when you combine talent with purpose," she said during her speech. "Marcus has shown us all that leadership isn't about climbing ladders, it's about building bridges." The applause that followed was deafening, but Marcus barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on Margaret, gratitude swelling in his chest. In that moment, he realized how much he owed to her, not just for giving him a chance, but for teaching him the importance of using his position to serve others. Her influence had transformed not only his career, but also his perspective on life itself. As Marcus's reputation grew, so did invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and corporate events. Initially hesitant to step into the spotlight, he eventually embraced these opportunities as a way to share his story and inspire others. One such event took place at a prestigious leadership summit held in Chicago. Standing before an audience of hundreds, Marcus recounted the day he chose to help Margaret instead of rushing to his interview, the decision that changed everything. "I'll never forget that morning," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach. "I thought I was sacrificing my future for a stranger, but looking back I see now that I wasn't losing anything. I was gaining something far greater: perspective. That act of kindness taught me that success isn't just about seizing opportunities for yourself. Sometimes it's about recognizing moments where you can make a difference even if it comes at a personal cost." The room fell silent as Marcus spoke, his words resonating deeply with the crowd. Many attendees nodded in agreement, while others scribbled notes in their journals. He went on to explain how kindness had opened doors he never expected, leading him to a fulfilling career and lifelong friendships. By the time he concluded his speech, the audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet in appreciation. Amidst the standing ovation, Marcus scanned the crowd and spotted Margaret sitting proudly in the front row. Her eyes glistened with tears as she smiled knowingly, as though she'd known all along how far he would come. After the session ended, they met backstage where Margaret pulled him into a warm embrace. "You've done well, Marcus," she whispered, "and you've stayed true to yourself. That's the greatest achievement of all." Though Marcus cherished his accomplishments, he never lost sight of the responsibility that came with them. He understood that privilege wasn't meant to be hoarded, it was meant to be shared. With this mindset, he dedicated himself to paying forward the kindness that had brought him so far. From sponsoring scholarship funds for disadvantaged students to volunteering at shelters during holidays, Marcus ensured that his actions aligned with his beliefs. He believed firmly that every small act of generosity mattered, no matter how insignificant it might seem. In time, Marcus's efforts extended beyond individual acts of charity. Inspired by Margaret's legacy, he founded his own nonprofit organization aimed at fostering economic mobility in underserved neighborhoods. The initiative focused on providing job training, financial literacy workshops, and entrepreneurial support to individuals striving to break the cycle of poverty. Within its first year, the organization helped hundreds of participants secure stable employment and launch small businesses, transforming entire communities in the process. Looking back on his journey, Marcus often reflected on the interconnectedness of life. What if he hadn't stopped to help Margaret that rainy morning? What if she hadn't offered him a chance at Whitmore Enterprises? And what if he hadn't chosen to prioritize kindness over ambition? While these questions lingered in his mind, Marcus ultimately found peace in accepting that life was full of uncertainties, and that sometimes the smallest choices yielded the biggest rewards. Today, Marcus is celebrated not just for his professional achievements, but for the ripple effect of his actions. His story serves as a reminder that success isn't defined solely by wealth or status. It's shaped by the impact we have on others. Every grocery bag picked up in the rain, every coffee shared with a stranger, and every door held open for someone in need creates a chain reaction of goodwill that extends far beyond what we can see. And as Marcus continues to forge ahead, driven by purpose and guided by gratitude, he carries with him the lessons of that fateful day. Life may be unpredictable, but one thing remains certain: kindness always finds its way back to you, often in ways you least expect.